All right, welcome back. We continue live right here at Pittsburgh CW. Bob Pompeani and Gene Collier with you tonight on the Bordas and Bordas hotline of the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call, 412-575-2600. Got some tweets in, also at KD Pomp, at Gene Collier. Rob Gateway says, normally I would not put much into Keller's first start, but the Pirates have not exactly been good at developing their talent, which is true. And, boy, they've been trotting out all sorts of pitchers there over the last 3 weeks. Gene and everyone who comes up seems to not get the job done. Now, Keller's a young kid who clearly was nervous and missed his pitches, and when that happens against a good hitting team like Cincinnati, you're going to pay the price. He did. Then he settled down for 3 scoreless innings after that. But can you take that away from this outing if you're him?
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the top of the show, I love to say the top of the show. But,
top of the show.
It's never good to give up 6 in the first. But, yeah, I mean, when you're in that situation like Mitch Keller, you have to take away any positive that you can. And in the 2 innings I saw, which were the second and third, you know, you seem to throw good pitches and have good stuff. So maybe it's just a simple matter of warming up a little bit more. I don't know, but I wouldn't let that depress me too much.
All right, let's go to the lines, Gene. We got them rocking tonight. We got Joe in Penn Hills kicking us off tonight. Hey, Joe, welcome to the Sports Call. Go right ahead.
Hey, Bob. Hi, Gene. How you doing?
Hey, Joe.
Good. You know, my 2 big disappointments in all this, I mean, it's a mess, but they've been here 2, 3, 4 years. Marte, Polanco, they will never improve because neither one knows what a strike zone is.
Exactly. Marte in particular swings at just about everything.
You know what? He's going backwards. I think he wants out of Pittsburgh. I don't know what he's doing. And Marte, and the other guy, he has a hitch in his back swing, and no one seems to be teaching him. And they're my 2 biggest disappointments. I don't have any faith in them anymore because every pitcher in the league knows that they have no idea what the strike zone is, so they're not going to throw them a lot of strikes, and then they get them in the hole. So those 2 don't produce. Oh, sure, a home run every once in a while. Look at tonight. Polanco strikes out with the bases loaded. And that's what I see, Bob and Gene. And them 2 are the most disappointing. They have not improved since they both signed those contracts 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that's one of the saddest things on this team right now.
That's a good point, Gene. Your take on that, and I think that's valid.
Yeah, I have no disagreement with that whatsoever. I mean, Marte is particularly frustrating. Not only is he apparently willing to cheat, which is really disappointing, but when he's not, when he's eligible to play, when he's not taking PEDs, he never understood the strike zone. He's never understood base running. He's never really understood which base to throw to. I mean, I understand, you know, he's regarded as one of the Pirates' better players over the past few years, but he is not a great player. He's a good player at best and not often. Polanco is a little bit more disciplined in his hitting approach. But again, we mentioned that we've made this point on the show before. The Pirates, even at their best, have good players, not great players.
All right, David Varney on Twitter has this to say. He says, homers are part of the game, but being a something shouldn't be. Didn't you have anything intelligent to say? If you're, listen, he's getting on Derek Dietrich. Derek Dietrich did what he had to do. That's what he is. He's a very, if you don't know, he's kind of a cocky personality. He's having fun with the game. He does a lot of crazy stuff. He has a unique personality, and the Reds are okay with that, even though it led to what what could have been an injury situation with guys getting involved in a benches clearing situation in Pittsburgh. And so now he did it again, and so now he's doubling down, and you wonder what the Pirate response would be. And again, Gene, I hope it doesn't get to that because I'd rather see them just pitch him better. He hits a lot of home runs this year. He's backing up what he's doing because he's hitting a lot of home runs. So,
yeah, I mean, I get your point, Bob. If you don't like it, then don't throw him those fat pitches that he can leave the ballpark with. But I mean, sometimes there's a price to be paid for doing what he did tonight. We'll see.
We'll see. Joe in Mount Lebanon. What's up, Joe? How are you?
Hey, Bob. The rotation next year looks like Archer will be out, Keller will be in, and how's Chad Cole coming along?
Why is Archer going to be out? He has still a couple of years left on a contract.
Is the next year an option year?
Yeah, but I mean, do you think
they're not going to pay him, Bob?
I don't think it's an outrageous, number.
I think it's not going to pay him $9 million.
Okay, but again, you're just going to do what then? Let him go? They're not going to trade him this year.
Let him go.
And if you trade him this year, you're not going to get much anyway.
Pardon me?
What are you going to get if you let him go or trade him at this point? You're going to get nothing, and so you're just going to let him go, and that's it. And that trade's over and done with. You're not going to work with him. You're not going to do anything to try to get him back on track.
Bob, it's been over a year and a half or 2 years. The guy's on a steady decline.
All right, I'm just saying, trying to get value out of your trade. You make it sound like he's totally done, out of the rotation. I disagree with that, Gene. What do you say about? You said something at the beginning of the show that you think you'd do something with him, but you wouldn't start him. I suspect you're not going to want to just get rid of him altogether, are you?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you got to try something different with him. You got to put him in the bullpen. Be the opener, if you will. I don't know whether he has minor league options, but something has to be done to convince Chris Archer that this isn't getting it done. And what are they, 1-8, 1-9 when he starts? It's unacceptable.
Yeah. All right, let's go out to Mike in Turtle Creek. Hey, Mike, how are you tonight?
Fine, Bob. Gene,
Hey.
glad to be on.
Thank you.
Hey, this Dietrich act, that's twice now against the Pirates. I was at the game last Thursday, 4 home runs by the Pirates. These guys didn't trot around or stand there and look. I mean, they ran around the bases. And I've been watching baseball for years. And Stargell, I don't remember these guys doing that. I mean, what is the act now with some of these players?
Well, he's that kind of guy. That's what he does. It's his personality. He wants to throw it in your face. He's backing it up. He's hitting a lot of home runs. He's hitting a lot of long home runs. And so the way to silence him is not to let up home runs, I suppose. But I know people are going to want headhunting going on tomorrow, and that could lead to some bad things. This is a team that has so much injury right now. I think the last thing you want is get guys involved and to have a broken hand involved,
Right. What did he do in the first game? Didn't he strike out twice?
Yeah, he did not have a good first game.
No, he didn't. So, I don't know.
It's just the way it is. He's a character, personality. I mean, that's how it is. All right, let's try Pete in Squirrel Hill. Hello, Pete. How are you tonight?
Hey, guys. How are you today? Hope your families had a good Memorial Day.
Thank
you.
you.
Hey,
Thanks.
Bob, I have a lot of respect for Peter Kirchin. Knows as much about the game, its current state, and its history as anybody. But talking before the Dodger game on ESPN tonight, he was talking about Bob Feller and Ted Williams, how they gave their, a couple of years of their baseball career in their prime to serve the country. I'm disappointed, Bob, he didn't mention Willie Mays. Willie Mays missed 52 and 53 because of his time in Korea. His first 2 years back, Bob, he hit 47 and 51 homers after missing 2 years of baseball. He breaks Ruth's record long before Aaron does if he didn't serve. And there's a reason that Sandy Koufax, Bob Gibson, Juan Marichal, Warren Spahn, Mickey Mantle, Duke Snider, and Hank Aaron called him the greatest all-around player the game will ever see. Thank you very much.
I mean, that's a pretty good soliloquy right there, Gene, would you say?
Yeah, very well prepared, very well delivered. Well, Willie Mays is the best player I've ever seen, but I've only been paying strict attention since 1961.
Well, there's no doubt where he is, and I do appreciate what he did. He left
Absolutely.
for 2 years and came right back. I didn't know it was 47-51. I knew he hit a lot of home runs. I didn't know it was quite that many that quick. That's impressive when you think about it, serving the country too. So interesting stuff. We're going to take a break here. It's 412-575-2600. If you'd like to call, give us a shout. You can also tweet us right here on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call, Pittsburgh CW.